know that we all gonna be alright. We gon' make it through if it takes us all night. No matter what the odds may bring our way, I can see the blessings coming our way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Blessings on blessings, yeah. I can see the blessings coming our way. Our way, our way. Blessings on blessings, yeah. I can see the blessings coming our way.
Hey guys, it's
Dre
and Bre, and you're tuned into Worth the Wait.
What's going on? It's another episode. Thank you guys for stopping by. Whether it's on YouTube and you're watching or it's on the audio and you're listening, we appreciate you tuning in every week. Much obliged. Obliged. So I'm here with my beautiful wife today, and we have a topic that we're excited to jump into. That we have dealt with this a lot. Actually, even recently, we had a situation where we had to do that. But a lot of people have asked about this, and this is, what is it again? It's how to forgive.
How to forgive in a relationship.
How to forgive and move forward in a relationship. Yes.
There we go.
How to forgive and move forward in a relationship. So where do you want to start, baby?
Well, the first thing that I thought about when we talked about this topic was all the different ways of forgiveness, I guess.
Okay.
Like how, it's one thing to forgive yourself. It's another to forgive your partner. But then it's a whole other thing to forgive someone from your past that isn't a part of the relationship, that holding on to or not moving on from or forgiving that person, how it can like trickle into your current relationship.
Yeah.
So there's 3 different ways and 3 different reasons why moving on and forgiveness is super important. And the first one I want to talk about is forgiveness in yourself, because even though it's not the other person, if you are holding any type of resentment, or if there's something in the past that you've dealt with and you just haven't really gotten either the clarity or the closure or have forgiven yourself, then your partner is going to experience some backlash from that, in a sense. So an example I'll give is when Dre and I first started dating, I had drinking problems. I think a lot of you probably already know this. And as we went into the relationship, obviously that's something I got better with. And when we were married, it became an issue again, in a sense. Like I realized, like, oops, I did it again. And it wasn't the same thing. Brittany.
You think the same thing?
I know. No, but it wasn't the same thing. It's not like I was drinking to cope with the pain or to not think or anything like that. I just didn't watch my drinking. I didn't monitor it to the point where I said something that hurt your feelings, that if just communicated differently wouldn't had hurt your feelings. And I realized, like, that whole night, that whole next day, like I just felt so guilty, and I was just like, like, how could I let something like this happen? I worked so hard to like not have this be a thing. And I just had to forgive myself. Like, hey, Bre, it could have been worse. You're human. And the fact that this is the first time it's happened in a long time, like, should make you feel proud of your growth. So it was easy to forgive myself when I knew that my intent wasn't to be malicious, wasn't to be mean, wasn't to take 10 steps backwards. It's just that, hey, sometimes we mess up. So in relationship, when you do mess up or you're not perfect or you don't feel the best about a decision that you made, it's important to forgive yourself and forgive yourself quickly, because if you keep holding on to that same resentment, then it's going to force you to focus on that versus what's actually happening in the relationship as you continue to move forward. But it's easier to forgive yourself when the other person forgives you too, which brings me to the next point, which is when you are trying to forgive your partner, the communication is always, always, always key, because whether I need you to forgive me so that I can forgive myself, or if I'm trying to forgive you for something that you did, it's hard to forgive someone if they're not remorseful. It's hard to forgive someone if they don't actually think that they messed up or did something wrong. So I think it's important that when you go through things where forgiveness needs to happen and there needs to be a plan for how to move on, that communication is at the foundation of that, because it's easy to say, I forgive you. It's not easy to forgive and move on. saying the words and doing an action, meaning there's something I need from you in order to forgive you. If it's trust that was broken, you have to earn that trust back. In order to earn the trust back, there has to be a plan. What does that look like? What are you going to do? What's going to make a difference to me? And I think that that is super important. And then lastly, when it comes to if you're in a relationship and you're holding on to some grudges or past hurt or past traumas, and there's certain people and certain experiences and situations that you haven't forgiven and gone through a process of how to move on from, it can ruin your relationship. Dre and I had a situation where my therapist told me, like, hey, you're holding on to a lot of resentment and hurt in a sense from your dad that, you know, I don't think you truly forgave him. I think you are okay and that you forgave him, but if you really think about it, he was like, I don't think that you have, and you're starting to take it out on your husband without even being conscious of it. So when it comes to getting forgiveness or forgiving people from your past, we have to remember that closure is not always going to be possible. That person may not be able to say what you need them to say.
Them.
Yeah, like you may not hear the words that you need that's going to give you the closure to say, okay, I forgive and I'm going to move on. So it's hard because you have to find the closure within yourself and within the situation. And most times the closure has to come even without reaching out to that person. When I realized the situation with my dad, my first thought wasn't to pick up the phone and call him. It was to sit down, figure out what I was still holding on to, and then really determine what needs to happen for me to fully let go. And what I realized is that I just had to make a choice in my heart to literally and fully forgive him and understand the situation and look at it from a different point of view, because the point of view is always, oh my gosh, I'm this little girl who her dad didn't want her. That's not the way I look at it now. I'm a grown and phenomenal woman who unfortunately had a father that wasn't mentally able and capable of caring and loving for me like he should or could have. And what happened and what didn't happen is not up to me. It's not my fault. It's not his fault at this point. It's just the situation. And I'm lucky and glad that I had a great mom and now I have a great husband, and I had to fully be like, I'm choosing to fully forgive, stop looking for the why, and just understand that it is what it is, forgive and move on. And what that looked like for me might be different for you if you're listening and you're trying to forgive and move on from someone. But it is important to evaluate what actually has to happen for me to move on, for me to forgive. That's important.
Got you. No, that's all. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with
I've had to forgive a lot of people. So.
with everything, and I just want to piggyback on some of the points that you made. So forgiving yourself is all about giving yourself grace, you know, and giving yourself room to make mistakes and understanding like, hey, I'm gonna make mistakes. But I think also giving yourself the grace and forgiving yourself also allows you not to be manipulated by certain people who may try to manipulate you and play the victim to you doing something, as if you're like just this horrible person or something like that, because you haven't forgiven yourself. They haven't forgiven you, I guess, to a certain extent. So you feel like you're just such this bad person and you're in the wrong, to where if you know that like, hey, I made a mistake, but I'm still growing, I'm still learning, I'm still trying to be a better person. Like, I make mistakes sometimes. That doesn't make me a bad person. I'm very sorry for what I did, and I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to do that. But also, I'm putting it in the context of understanding that although I did that and it wasn't intentional and that's not what I meant to do, that I'm not a horrible person. I'm growing. What we always say is it's not about perfection. It's about like growth. We're striving for growth, or to continue to grow and not to be perfect. So I think that's a big part of what you're talking about as far as like forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
But in the process of how to forgive and move forward, I think that we all should strive to forgive no matter what the situation is. That doesn't mean that you are accepting of the behavior to a certain extent. It just means that you have healed from it, you've evaluated it, and you're ready to move on from it. I think the forgiveness is kind of like stitching up an open wound. It's like some of us have learned to kind of just live with open wounds and you're just living with them. But every time you're in a new relationship, a new situation, it gets easily aggravated because it's still open. But like you said, forgiving in the past is stitching up that old wound to a certain extent, and it will still be a scar, and the scar will be there to remind you of the past thing that has happened and what got you there, but it's not something that's openly there to be aggravated and messed with. And so with us knowing that we all should forgive, I think the biggest thing is how do we move forward after that, because I think that that can vary. I think the first thing is like one of the words that you mentioned is intention. So understanding the person's intention, and you really have to know a person to understand like if this was done out of malice or if they did it subconsciously or not on purpose, or I know in certain situations it's not truly who you are. Maybe you were drinking and that's when it came out that way. Because it's not necessarily always what you said. It's more how you said it or something like that. But I think the intention is important to know like what it is. And I think also evaluating the action plays a big part in what moving forward looks like, because there are some actions that I'm not going to say there are any acts that are unforgivable, but there's some actions that we can still move forward with each other. And there's some actions to where it's like, I can forgive you for myself and for my own healing. But I can't move forward in this relationship
Yeah.
because the action that you did is just so like, that's not somebody, it tells more about your character and who you are, and that's not the type of person I want to be with. You'll notice I didn't say it was unforgivable, because I think that you need to forgive, like I said, that provides you closure into your next situation. But there are certain actions to where it's like, I can't move forward with this person.
Well, one thing that I think is crazy, and I hear it when my friends talk or when people DM me and send me their real life scenario situations, is that people look at forgiving someone as like a sign of weakness in a sense, when in reality, it's really you taking your power back.
It's just a sign of
it's you
strength.
taking your control back. It's when you refuse to forgive someone, they have a hold on you. They have a certain type of haha, like I gotcha. You know, it's like one me, zero you.
For
The
sure.
moment that you say, you know, I forgive you. I don't understand it. I can't say I'm going to understand, but I'm going to choose to forgive. The moment that you say and do that, that other person has just released any power and control that they had over you or your situation. And I think for women specifically, the best thing that you can do when a guy does you wrong is to forgive that man and move on. So like what Dre was saying, you know, certain acts don't call for a second or third or another chance. But yes, everyone should be forgiven, because again, release that control, take back that power, and then move on to another situation and take what you learn from that into the next one. Because power and control is such a mind game. You know what I mean? Like when people are in
manipulative.
relationships and someone's done something wrong and you haven't been able to forgive them, you're still in the situation, you're still being done wrong, still haven't forgiven them, but you're fighting with them and you're hoping that they change. And it's just like, oh, it's so much more peaceful. You just forget and or move on, forgive and move on. Because sooner or later you will forget what happened to you when that person is replaced by someone who does all the things right, you know? And I just think that for most of the, I guess, you know, seeing and understanding what happened, forgiving that person, and then the last step, deciding, okay, now is this something that we can move on together with, or is it something I have to move on alone with? What is that going to look like? And I think sometimes that last one doesn't even come up in conversations. It's just that you're dealing with someone who you constantly have to forgive, but they continue to do you wrong. And that last step of like analyzing, is this thing that I'm forgiving something I want to continue to deal with, or something that should be an eye opener so that I'm no longer going to choose to deal with it anymore?
Yeah, and I think that's really what this episode is kind of about, right? Because forgiveness, like we said, we should all forgive, but the moving forward part is the most challenging part, and there's so many different variables in the moving on part, and how to move forward now that this one thing has happened. And like I said, it's more intention, but evaluating the acts, like I said, is huge, is a big thing, because that will let you know if, hey, we need to go to therapy after this, or sometimes you look at it, if you take some time, and we've both done this, to where you realize actually that thing wasn't that big of a deal, honestly. And all it took was them saying like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, for you to just be like, oh, okay, like I'm
Yeah.
fine about it. Like it wasn't that big of a deal. It's just it kind of stung a little bit, or it kind of hurt me a little bit. But that, what I've noticed for us is, we varied in our responses to how we move forward. Of course, because we're married, we continued to move forward with things, but it wasn't always just like a simple, like, you know, situation. There was times to where we had to like really sit down and talk about something. There was times where we had to call an emergency counseling session and like have somebody help us work through this problem. So it's different. And there's times in our past to where we cut off relationships because of specific actions that have happened, and understanding, this is not somebody I want to move forward with. But I think you just have to evaluate, I'll say it again, the intention and the act to determine like, does moving forward make sense with this person?
Okay, so once you get to the point of move forward with the person or move forward without the person, I guess we should talk about ways in which to actively actually move on. So, do you want to talk about if you're choosing to move forward with or without?
I would say with, because I probably have more experience in that
I was thinking the
area,
same.
and then you have probably more experience in the cutting folks off.
Yes. All right, take it away.
So I always say this when it comes to people who are dealing with anything, whether that's traumatic things or things that they're struggling with or things that are reoccurring, is that number one is they have to see what they did as an issue or that there was a problem. If somebody doesn't see that, then it's going to be very difficult, almost impossible to move forward if there's something that they're doing that really, rubs you the wrong way or really bothers you, or something that's traumatic or something that's unhealthy that they're doing. It's like, if they can't understand or see the why that they actually, or understand the action that they took or why it's wrong, then that's kind of a non-starter. So it's like, first they have to identify that. They identify that, that's good. Then next, they have to actively be searching for a solution to fixing that problem. They have to actively be trying to understand, how do I get through this? How do I get past this? How do I make sure that this thing does not happen again?
I remember you said that's one reason why all of my baggage and trauma and issues didn't turn you off, because I was at least like aware of them and had a plan for how I was gonna
and
fix
actively
them.
was trying to fix it.
Yeah.
So then the next step is that if you know somebody is aware, actively trying to fix it, then you have to be patient and understand that what they're trying to overcome and what they're trying to battle is something that they maybe have dealt with for most of their lives. And it's going to take time for them to overcome those things. You're going to say one thing in one moment, be like, I don't want you to do this, or I really dislike when you do that, or when you do this thing, it makes me feel this way. And just because you say it in that moment, it's going to happen again. 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 Like, and they don't mean to do it. They're not trying to do it. It's just something that's kind of ingrained in their mind and ingrained in their head and ingrained in, the way that they've just been raised and grown up. It's been a part of who they are or how they act in certain situations. So you have to be patient with them and give them grace and continue to forgive them in those situations as they're trying to be better and as they're trying to do better when it comes to moving forward. And then lastly, talked about this in the past episodes, just celebrating somebody's wins. That if somebody is showing behavior that is better, or that showing that they are taking heed or listening to the things that you're saying, and they're making an effort to change, even though you may see it as simple, you need to celebrate those things. You need to make sure those things don't go unnoticed, because all that does is encourage that person more to try to be more cognizant of the things that they're trying to fix and the things they're trying to grow in when, they're operating in relationship with you. So I think that that's kind of the big things as far as moving forward in relationships. And I think also is a lot of times people feel stuck. And I think that if you are the person on the other side and you have somebody who seems to be at their wits end, or they feel like they just don't know what else to do, a lot of times they're not looking for you to be fixed automatically. They're just looking for you to take the next step. So you can't, so if I'm like, I don't like your anger towards me, I don't like your anger towards me, your anger, and I talk about this for 6 months or 8 months or a year, and seem like I'm fed up about it, or I seem like I'm tired about it, I'm not saying I want your anger, or I think it's fair for your anger to just stop automatically. I just want to see you take the first step. At least let me see you sign up for counseling. Let me see you pick up a book or join a group or something that shows me that you're taking a step forward to trying to solve this issue. And that goes hands in hand with what I said with somebody aggressively trying to solve the problem, is that you have to take that effort if you want to move forward to be better and not have those things repeat.
Well, I think if someone is trying to break a habit, which is what you mentioned, like if someone is trying to stop a certain behavior, it's important that if you're in a relationship, you communicate with your person what you need from them to support you in this journey of breaking that habit. Because it could get very upsetting if you continue to see the behavior again and again, because like you said, it's a habit. It's going to take some time to break it. But if it's not slowly getting better, then we're not really moving forward. So I think it's important to come up with an actual plan of like, this is what I know I have a problem with. This is what I'm going to do to work on it. And if I am ever going through this, this is what I need from you. And when I am doing all of the right things and I'm the plan is being done and I'm making these strides, I need you to show me support in a different way. I need you to celebrate me, celebrate these small wins. And that's something that really helped Dre and I when I had anger issues and I would literally I would scream, I would throw stuff. I would have to tell him, like, if you're around me and that happens, just grab me and pray over me for a second and then just like leave me alone, because it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm healed and thank you, like God is good. It's like, no, I need a second. But it helps if you just hold me, pray over me, because it calms me. And then the moment he walks away, I feel super petty about the fact that I just needed that type of reassurance. But it reminds me that this person loves me and cares for me and is doing the thing that I asked him to do to hold me accountable for my growth. So when those little moments happen, they get shorter and farther in between. And sooner or later, it's not happening anymore. So I think it's important to have a plan with your person, because they can say that they're working on something, but if you're not seeing anything, are we actually growing? Yeah. So, and then there's nothing more beautiful, I feel like, when you're in a relationship and you can be honest with someone about what your issue may be, and for you to be able to contribute to their growth. Because yes, I can do it on my own, but why should I when I have you as my person? You should be helping me on this journey. And then when the problem resolves or the habit is changed, it's that much better. It's that much better. That's not proper English, is it?
They know what you're saying.
It's that. How do you properly say that?
That's fine. It's that much better.
That sounds really crazy. Well, you guys know what I mean. It feels so much more rewarding when you can say that you've done that growth as a couple.
Yes.
So, okay, talking about moving on
when you're
if
not continuing.
You're choosing to leave the person.
Yes.
Okay, so I am a big person. I feel like if you guys follow me, know me, you know this by now. Writing things down helps me tremendously, because it's one thing to have thoughts in your head. It's another to write it down and remind yourself of it daily, because again, with the intentional word, it forces you to be intentional. You can have a moment or a thought and it flutter away within a day, and then it's never something that was thought about again. If you write something down and you put it on your mirror, you're looking at that every day until you no longer need to look at that. So in past relationships, when I would choose to move on from a person, I've realized a few things. One, there's always that moment of being like, ugh, I'm too good and I'm leaving, right?
Yeah.
The moment that person shows that they don't care, like the moment that you don't hear back from them, the moment that they're not blowing up your phone, the moment that they're not posting anything on social media that shows any regard that their feelings are hurt, you start to feel like, oh, oh, he don't miss me. Oh, he don't want, like, does he not realize what he missed? And that's like a trap where us girls emotionally get dragged back into the relationship and typically take a few more of those exact same things to actually leave. So when I realized that about myself, I was like, why does this happen? And I realized it's a desire to feel wanted, and it is a need to feel like you're a prize.
Yeah.
And I told this to Dre, every guy that I dated before him, I felt I was the prize. You're the first relationship where I feel like I'm a winner. It's like I won the prize. Like it's me, you know? So when you're dating people and in the same instance that you are trying to be the prize and like, look at me, you should be happy to have me, we kind of do the exact opposite, and we give that power and that control back by coming back and trying to one up them or be the person who leaves, making the other person feel hurt. Because if the other person feels hurt, it's easier for you to move on. But when you're the person who's hurt, it's harder to move on. And same thing that we talked about earlier, you know, forgiving someone doesn't mean you're going to get the closure that you need. So when I think of moving on from a situation, I think it's important to write down and remind yourself why you're choosing to leave that situation. Because the moment that you go to pick up that phone, send that text, do that call, or see them in person and act up, you can remind yourself of all the reasons why you said that you're leaving the situation. And same thing, accountability partners are great. Your closest friends, you know how us girls get when a guy breaks our girl's heart. If you tell your girlfriend about what that boy did, they will not let you go back to that man, or they'll make you feel really bad for doing it if you do. So I think it's important to not only tell yourself, but tell the people who love and care about you the most, and let them know, I don't want to be back in this situation. I do know that it's easy for one conversation to be had or something to be done that would let me run back to it. But I want to ask you to hold me accountable and remind me of this conversation. And if I do start to slip back, this is what I need from you. Because unless you do something like that, you're probably just playing games and you just want to feel wanted, and you're going to wait for him to do the right thing or say the right thing.
Yeah.
And you're going to go right back into the situation. The next thing I want to talk about, I think, is major, and it is getting therapy. I think that if you are trying to move on from a situation where you had to forgive someone, or maybe you're trying to figure out how to forgive that person and move on, the best way to do it is through finding self-growth within yourself, because you're not going to get what you want out of that person. You may not see them hurt. You may not see them feeling like they made a mistake. You may not get that, but what you can get is the benefit of feeling that, yes, I did it. Look at the growth. Look at what I'm doing. Look at how much better I feel. Look at where I want to be. Look at who I know I deserve. And it's hard to wrap your mind around all of that by yourself sometimes. Sometimes you need someone to unpack everything for you and make you remember what the goal is. The goal isn't to have one up on somebody. The goal is for you to live a happy and whole life. And you're not going to get there if you're being petty and you're worried about someone else's feelings and wanting to feel like you're the one on top. The case is, most of the time, especially with men, is you're not the one on top. They're fine. They're not thinking about you. They're living their life. So what are you going to do to make sure that you're doing the same for yourself? So I would definitely say that would be a big thing. So self-reflection, making sure that you're actually aware of why you're choosing to leave, coming up with a plan for once you do leave, how can I make sure I don't go back? And then 3, the self-growth, whether it's by yourself, with a friend, with a family member, or with a specialist or professional who can really help you dive deeper and focus on what really truly matters. But at the end of the day, forgiveness and moving on are both choices. You have to make a choice to do it, and you have to make a choice to commit to it. So
Yeah, I think piggybacking on your first point, those were great, is that theoretically relationships are easy. Theoretically. Like when you look in theory, if somebody's shown that they can't be consistent with you and they can't commit to you, you should leave that relationship. Theoretically, it's easy. It makes sense. Theoretically, the way to communicate effectively in a relationship makes sense. Oh, be honest, care for somebody's feelings. Don't say things in a way that makes them defensive. Theoretically, all that stuff makes sense. What makes relationships difficult is the emotion part of it.
yeah,
That makes it
emotion and ego.
Yeah, that makes it completely more difficult and more one dimensional than just the theoretical what you should do in a situation. And I say that because, to speak to your point, and this is not just a lesson for relationships, it's just a lesson in life, is that a lot of times in life, first in life, you have to understand the difference between motivation and discipline. And I'll use it in an example like this, is that motivation is a match and discipline is the candle. So motivation is lighting the flame, but discipline is building the mechanism to sustain the flame. And I realized that when people are leaving relationships, you have to build a mechanism to stay disciplined. And that could look different for everybody. The motivation may be, oh, this person cheated, or oh, your friend just opened your eyes by something that they said, or oh, you saw something on Instagram that made you realize this person isn't right for you, or this is not the right decision or the right time for this person. That's the motivation. But the discipline that you need to put in place is where a lot of people mess up. And I encourage people, I'm like, yo, if you need to block somebody on social media because you can't see them, if you see them having fun or living life, it would affect you in some type of way, or make you call them or hit them up, block them on Instagram. If you need to block their number, if you need to type in their number as don't call, you remember what happened. Like, if that's the mechanism that you need to put in place to help combat your emotions, because theoretically, you shouldn't hit them up or hit that person up or hit that girl up. But with your emotions involved, it's very hard to like stay disciplined all the time. And it's not, like I said, not just in relationships, with diets. Like, you have to put in the mechanism for discipline. Like, even Bree's trying to wake up on time, or wake up at a certain time. She has now put her phone outside the bedroom, so she has to get up to turn off the alarm. Everybody doesn't have to do that, but that's specific to her, because she had her motivation of why she wanted to do it, but then she had to build the mechanism for her to sustain that flame and to remain disciplined. So she had to craft something that was specific to her, that allows her to accomplish the goal and stay disciplined in what she's trying to do. So I feel like with your first point, when people are moving on from something, you have to build whatever mechanism you possibly can, and that is catered directly towards you in the situation that you're in, to not let you fall back into that. Like, whether that's, we have friends who moved back home and had to do something. We have friends, I know people who've changed their numbers and done something so the person can't contact them. Like, if you know you're in something that's not good for you and that's toxic and is really affecting your life in a negative way, of course we don't want you to take crazy extreme measures to, not have the situation be a part of what's going on, but you need to set up ways for you to not fall back into that. And that's such an important thing.
You have
when
to
it comes
know
to
yourself too.
Exactly. That's part of it. And a lot of people don't know themselves, right?
Yeah.
They think that they know themselves, and they think that, oh, I can resist this or I can resist that, or they haven't necessarily admitted to themselves that they have a certain issue or have a certain problem, or like a certain type of people, or like when, even though it's an unhealthy behavior, you kind of like how it makes you feel when they do that to you, or when they act this way to you. Like, you haven't come to a realization that you feel that way or that you like that. And it's about knowing yourself to know,
knowing that the reason why you like it is a very toxic thing from your past. And it's like, it's a whole thing. Yeah. That's really good advice though. That makes a lot of sense. I think you can always equivalent relationship stuff to like career and fitness. Like, it always correlates and is so relatable. It's like, yes, same thing. If you want to meet a certain goal at work, or if you want to lose weight, it's like, you got to first have the motivation. Yes, it's great having inspo pictures, seeing the nice bodies, or seeing the money that everyone else is making. But the discipline, that's where knowing yourself and putting in the proper plan and having the guts and the strength to actually commit to what you should be doing, versus going after what in the moment might feel good.
And I think also with that is understanding what the goal is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, even if we talk about the discipline and motivation thing, it's like, if you're trying to stay disciplined to do something, it's like, are you committing to a plan that doesn't really make sense for you because you don't have the actual goal in mind? And I could use like working out as an example, because it's like, let's say you want to lose 15 pounds over the next 3 months. There are more ways. Like if your plan to reach that is I'm gonna wake up at 6:00 a.m. I'm gonna go in the gym. I'm gonna run on the treadmill, and this is the way I'm gonna lose 15 pounds. It's like, well, your goal isn't to wake up at 6 a.m. Your goal isn't to run on the treadmill. Your goal is to lose 15 pounds. If you follow that plan, but you're not a morning person, or if you set that plan in place and you're not a person who likes to run on a treadmill, a lot of times you'll fail because you put together a discipline mechanism that doesn't even fit who you are.
Yeah.
But because you are off about what the goal is. It's like the goal is to lose 15 pounds. I can do that in classes. I can run outside. I can get on a bike. I can do it in the evening. I can do it midday after lunch. I can do it something on the week. It's like there's so many different ways to accomplish this goal. And I think a lot of times we fall for the trap as we see somebody do something one way and think that's the way to do it. So then we try to set up our discipline mechanism to match theirs so that we can get the same result, to where it's like, well, they're a different person. That worked for them because they're different than you. You, as a different individual, need to set it up differently for yourself. So I think that that's just important too, is understanding, keeping the goal in mind. So in this relationship space, if you're moving on from somebody, the goal is not to fall back into the thing, or, you know, in relationship with this person who you've identified isn't the person that you need to be in relationship with. Just because your friend did it one way or a family member did it one way does not mean that that's the way that you need to do it. The goal isn't to block somebody. The goal isn't to, you know, I don't know, make somebody feel bad for not being with you. The goal is to be able to move on from the situation, and however you need to do that may be different from somebody else, but keep that goal in mind.
It's also important to make sure that you figure out ways to, in your next relationship, note what's happening and catch it before it gets too late. Like there's always red flags that probably were missed. It's like, how do I make sure this doesn't happen to me again? Or how to make sure I'm not with someone who is doing this to me, because it's obviously not good for me. So
yeah, I think that's the biggest part too about, and we can end on this note, is it kind of reminds me of sports. I played football all my life. Is essentially after every game we would watch the film. So that's just evaluating the game, replaying it back in our heads, replaying it back, in this case physically, and seeing where we went wrong. A lot of times you'll see that, you know, the other person did something wrong, but then sometimes you did something wrong, or there was a different way that you could have handled it, or you contributed to some of the downfall of what things may have been, even if it's that you just allowed certain things to happen. And maybe if you didn't allow certain things to happen, that person wouldn't have even thought that that was okay to do, or that was a behavior that they continue to have.
Yep.
Or if you were accusing somebody of something that they weren't doing, that you fostered an environment to where they're like, I'm getting accused of stuff I'm not even doing multiple times because of your insecurities. Well, actually, maybe I might start doing this stuff then, because you're accusing me. Like, you may have contributed sometimes to some of the things. So not saying you have or you didn't, but just evaluate whenever you're leaving, whether you're moving on or staying. Watch the tape, like evaluate that relationship, that situation, and that moment, and really replay it and be like, all right, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What could I do better in the future? And so you can ultimately learn from that, because what we don't want to do, as Bre said, is continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again, because that's not helping you or that other person.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
That was a good one.
Forgive and move on.
Forgive and move forward. Well, thank you guys for listening, and tuning in for another episode. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at It's Dre Smith, at Brianna Ponte, and at The Relationship Restored, at Relationship Restored on Instagram. But make sure to go to relationshiprestored.com if you want to, send us a topic, or there'll be a contact section on the website to where you can write in and say like, hey, I would love Dre and Bre to talk about this or talk about that on Worth the Wait. We'll make sure to, shout you out too if you give us a good topic. So we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Peace.